This podcast is brought to you by Iris TV. Streaming is now bigger than broadcast and cable, but we all watch our favorite shows and movies on hundreds of different devices and apps. Iris TV makes it easy for advertisers to target viewers with precision at scale across all these platforms. They do this by enabling AI to analyze millions of videos from the leading publishers to create the largest contextual data marketplace for streaming. By building their campaigns with Iris-enabled data, brands like Carl's Jr. are driving higher lifts in awareness and sales while publishers are generating higher yield. Learn more about Iris TV and explore their private marketplace deals by visiting iris.tv/PMP. That's iris.tv/PMP. Welcome to the Marketecture Podcast. I'm Eric Paparo. We have a great show today. We have Eric Franchi and our special guest, Adam Epstein, who is the co-CEO of Ad Marketplace. And the reason we have Adam on, in addition to him being a search expert, is that he formerly worked in the U.S. District Court and has a great deal of experience in legal issues. So he's going to come here and talk to us about some of the things I talked about in my Monday newsletter, which are the potential remedies for Google in its search case. And maybe we'll talk about Yelp, and maybe we'll talk about some other stuff. So this week's interview on Marketecture is with Dan Rua of Admiral. We talked about it last week that they had raised $19 million. So that conversation's on the podcast and on Marketecture TV for free until Monday when it goes behind the paywall. And we have a big announcement. If you don't get enough of me talking and giving opinions on Twitter and elsewhere, we have a new opportunity, which is I'm doing an AMA on the AdTech God Slack channel. So next Wednesday, September 4th at 1 p.m. Eastern, I will be answering any questions anyone has to ask in the Slack channel to the best of my typing ability. If you are not part of the AdTech God Slack channel, it's very easy to join. You have to go to adtechgod.com, and it's pretty obvious where to go. There's a tab, and then you just have to fill in a form, and we will give you access, or we will not. We try to limit it to people who are actively in the community. We tried not to put in like recruiters and press people. So if you are a member of the community, advertising community, please join the AdTech God Slack community, and then we'll give updates about the AMA, which will start at 1 p.m. Eastern on next Wednesday. Hope you can join us. It's an experiment. All right. With all that said, let's get into it. So, Adam, you are our dual threat, ad tech and legal. Tell us, how did you get here? Just what's your background that got you from being in the district court to running an ad tech company?
Sure. Yeah. So I was not a district court judge, although I would have loved that job. I was the law clerk to the judge, and that was after law school and after working at a big law firm in New York for a year and a half. Decided I did not want to bill time in 6-minute increments my entire life, but I did love the law and really enjoyed my time with the judge. But wanted to get into business, and this is around 2000, 2003. And went into ad tech because it seemed like a place where at that time things were happening. And I was hustling on Craigslist looking for ways to help people with legal and business matters. And I came across the folks at Marketplace, and they needed some help on both, and ended up getting the job as a 3-day-a-week general counsel. And that ended up becoming a full-time thing. And eventually, a couple years later, became the president and partner with the founder, Jamie Hill. And we've been kind of doing that for, I think, 21 years now. And we've been in the search space, spun out of eBay. We had a pay-per-click text ads product for them, and they decided to go a different direction. We had 200,000 advertisers nobody else had. And we found ourselves selling pay-per-click keyword-based text ads. And it's been kind of a wild ride since then, but it's been a heck of a lot of fun. And we've you guys have obviously been in the industry for a long time. Everything kind of comes around cycles, so it doesn't really change. It just kind of echoes. And this is definitely, a moment in time when, we're kind of seeing that happen again.
Yeah. And as a side note, you're the first guest we've ever had who didn't work at Undertone at some point.
Okay, nice. I'm glad you guys are reaching out there.
All right. So you've been in search for a very long time. Let's just start first. Do you think Google's a monopoly?
Yeah, I agree with the judge. I think Google's a monopolist. It's acted as one to maintain its monopoly. And it's, I think kind of written in black and white at this point.
Yeah, I guess by law, they are a monopoly in the United States. They've been declared one. How has that affected your business? I'm interested since you've been in the weeds for so many years.
Well, it makes it really hard to get distribution. I'm happy to sort of kind of go back and do the whole history of
no, please spare us.
I could do it probably in about 2 minutes, but it's it starts out with what Gates and Allen coming up with an operating system. They see the PC and they build one for IBM that turns into a company called Microsoft that builds out Windows. And then the internet comes along. A guy named Mark Andreessen comes up with something called a browser with Netscape. Gates is writing a book about the future of the road ahead and also writing exclusive contracts to box out Netscape. It's called Browser Wars 1.0. And the judge and the DOJ decided that's an antitrust violation. They're going to break up Microsoft. That actually didn't go through, but what they did do is they untied the browser from the operating system. And that allowed some guys who were working at a dorm in Stanford named Larry and Sergey to, at the same time build out a search engine, and then came up with advertiser monetization through CPC text ads, had an IPO, released something called Chrome, licensed their results and ads to some folks. And then we had Browser Wars 2.0. And that's became something they then made exclusive, those licensing agreements. And Apple decided not to build a search engine and instead take $20 billion a year from Google. And now the DOJ and the judge have said that that's illegal as well. So again, it kind of all echoes. And in the meantime, we were, kind of a little company trying to just find ways to connect consumers directly to advertisers when they were, expressing intent. And, we're pretty excited about the fact that distribution might open up. And I think it's great for consumers and it's great for ad tech.
Well, there's a big difference between this scenario and the Microsoft scenario because consumers really drove the choice of using Chrome. Consumers drove the choice of using Apple as the search engine or as a starting point for search. And consumers seem to prefer Google search over other options, at least to date. So whereas in the Microsoft case, there was a lot of coercion and deals that made that happen.
I mean, the judge is pretty clear that Google has the best search engine right now and has for a long time. And that the reason for that over the last 10 years, at least, is because they just have the scale. They just have the scale of the search queries. And I think it's, they have 9 queries for every one that all of their competitors see overall. In mobile, it's like 19 to 1. And when you've just got 19x more data points than all of your competitors combined, it's really tough to build a competing search engine that's going to have the relevancy on the results of the ad side. So that's kind of how they've maintained a monopoly. Not to say that there aren't smart people out there who couldn't come up with really relevant search engines if they had access to those queries as well.
I have a question. Maybe there's a rat hole, but when we talk about Google having more search queries as a advantage, is the advantage knowing what people are looking for, or is the advantage seeing what they click on when they get the results, or is the advantage knowing what pages to look for on the open web?
You nailed it. Those are basically the 3 things the judge said all come into play. So they get to see the queries, they know where to go index, and they know how to present results in a more relevant way because they know where the clicks are coming. So yeah, that's the data that flows out of having exclusive access to those queries has a multiplying effect in the analysis they're able to do to bring the relevancy of both the results and the ads to folks like Apple.
Yeah, it's almost like it's the greatest network effect business of all time, in addition to the best economic model of all time.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why they might be the biggest company in the history of the world, with the greatest profit margins that seem to go up by 20% every year, no matter what, even though their market share doesn't. So yeah, it's been a great run, and they've made decisions that are pretty logical. When more than half your comp is coming from your equity, you've got to do things to support that stock price, and when your market share can go up above 90%. You've got to find other ways to drive enterprise value. So they're smart people. They're following their incentives. They just ended up having to dominate the entire market in order to maintain those things.
All right, let's go into it. So they're declared a monopoly. There's going to be a second trial. They call it a mini trial to figure out the remedies. There's some jockeying going on as to whether that mini trial waits until the appeal happens or if it happens immediately. It's going to be a while, no matter what. But let's start opining about what remedy would make sense. So the primary problem the judge has identified is the distribution deals. And that involves Apple, but also Android manufacturers and Chrome and other things, and Firefox, Mozilla. So, what do you think the right remedy is here?
Yeah, I mean, you've heard everything from, hey, let's break up Google, which I know you wrote about, and that's a sexy headline, that's cathartic, that's emotionally compelling. It might be a structural remedy that, if they don't comply with an injunctive relief, I think should be on the table. But I don't know that that's going to lead to the benefits that the court's going to try to drive. Really, let's start with the consumer, right? What you really want is the consumer to have the ability to have an innovative and compelling search experience. And for that to happen, and Apple's probably the best example here, Apple should be able to curate its own search experience instead of having to push every query to Google SERP and saying, hey, just send us a check and let us know how it goes. They could pull from Google search results, search ads. They could supplement them with their own search results or directly sold search ads or from third parties. They could add in some AI there. They could create a pretty compelling experience for users in search if they weren't subject to an exclusive default distribution agreement that allows them to do none of these things. It really had like a stop work order even on their suggest as recently as like 5 or 6 years ago from Google. So that's really the issue, is that the remedy, I think, could be pretty straightforward, which is kind of just rolling it back to when Google used to license out its results and license out its ads, and then allow other competitors to do the same, and then really move the locus of control for the consumer experience a little bit closer to the user, which would be Apple or the other browsers that you mentioned, or the Android devices.
But let's play this out. So the judge can't tell Apple what to do, right? The judge cannot issue a ruling that says, Apple, you need to build a search engine, because Apple wasn't convicted of anything. The judge can't do that. Let's say that the judge says, Google, one option is you're not allowed to pay them for exclusivity. So exclusivity is struck, but you could still pay them for position or something, or just to be there. In which case, Google still wins because people choose them, and Apple still makes a lot of money because there's some rev share. Option 2 is judge says, Google, you can't pay Apple anything. No money can transfer between you and Apple for this search stuff. In which case, Apple loses $20+ billion in high margin revenue a year and can't retrieve it because Bing and the other guys can't pay nearly as much. So Apple naturally built its own search engine. That's how I see it playing out. What do you, Eric? Also, feel free to jump in here.
Eric, you can back me up here as a network guy. Option 2 is not going to work. So option 2 is probably the worst case scenario. It would make things worse for everybody involved. The judge does understand that Apple's going to have to take some time to build out its search chops. It has no ability right now to even run an A/B test on a single search result or to get price discovery on a single ad. So Google has to be a participant in this market as it is now. It just can't participate as an exclusive distributor and saying, look, either you're going to take my ads and you're going to take my results and I get it all, or you get nothing from me.
So you're saying option 1, just strike the exclusivity.
Option 1, and Google says they're paying for exclusivity, and they certainly require exclusivity in order to get paid. But this is an ad network, right? What they're really doing is they're buying clicks from Apple, and they're paying Apple for the some rev share percentage of those clicks. They're packaging up, they're selling to advertisers. So it's not really like a model that we aren't all really familiar with, which is they still have to pay for that traffic. The thing is that other people could compete to buy that traffic as well, and advertisers would see a lot of benefits from that, from transparency to lower rates to the ability to do optimization.
Yeah, I don't buy it, because Google's going to monetize every search much better than anybody else, and they're going to win any A/B test, and they're going to have the exact same position they're in for a lower price tag. Okay,
so let's talk about that. So Google pricing to advertisers goes up about 20% a year no matter what. Their ability to share that revenue is interesting because they've got, they get to sell a package of clicks to advertisers. And PMax, as you're probably aware, is another step in that direction. If you have your own and operated sites and you have third-party sites, and you've got to share revenue on your third-party sites, and you get to sell a package of clicks to an advertiser, are you going to price up your O&O traffic, or are you going to price up your third-party traffic? You're probably going to price up your O&O traffic and decrease the prices on your third-party traffic because you've got to share revenue on that. So it's very possible if Apple is sending half the clicks to Google, and Google's making $160 billion a year on search, that maybe 75 to 80 billion of that value is actually from Apple. And Apple's getting paid 20 billion in tax. So it's possible that there's like $50 billion in profit that Google's making from the Apple clicks. And you can imagine there's a possibility that Apple can want to capture some of that value by selling direct or through other third parties. Monopoly profits are real. And, there's a lot of reason to believe when you just do the simple math that came out from the evidence in this case, that Google is making a lot of profit on the clicks it's buying from Apple. And there's a lot of value that can be returned to Apple and advertisers if that market was more competitive.
I would kind of buy it if the number two player was maybe a third the size of Google. They could scrap their way up through better monetizations, just loss leading with distribution deals. Because remember, Microsoft is not going to be prohibited from paying Apple whatever it feels like after Google is restrained in some way. But
exactly.
But it's like 5% to 95%. I just don't see how they catch up.
I mean, that's the whole point. And I don't think the right way to think about it is as an all or nothing proposition. Like, it's either Google's monetizing it or Microsoft's monetizing it or Apple's monetizing it. The idea is that you'd have competition for these clicks. And so Google would be bidding on these clicks. Apple would be able to sell directly occasionally. If, as they built up a sales team, Microsoft could come in, Ad Marketplace could come in and buy some of these clicks. And we see that these clicks are kind of undervalued to the publisher, right? In the publisher TAC perspective. So that's where you're going to see market activity and competition. Because there's so much profit being made here, you can do a 25% discount to the advertisers, pay Apple 25% more, and still make a really nice margin. So I really do think there's a lot of value that can be redistributed if there was an open market.
Yeah, it's all dependent on Apple choosing to do these things. It could be that Apple goes from 20 billion to 15 billion from Google because it's not exclusive anymore and just sits on their laurels and takes the money.
And that'll be the remedy would have to address that. That Google, I think, would have to have a certain rev share they'd have to pay. It'd have to be pari passu with whatever they're charging for those same clicks on Chrome.
Okay, let's talk Chrome. So Chrome is owned by Google. Pretty hard to regulate that, but it is within the judge's purview. So the judge could force Google to have a choice screen or some other mechanism by which Chrome is no longer advantaged of Google. And a lot of this started when Bloomberg first wrote the story that Chrome spin out was on the table. I made the point, and many other people did, that Chrome as an independent business would not be very attractive. Browser businesses are dependent on search revenue for the most part. I mean, Chrome has its Chromebooks and things like that, but it's really not a very big business. So what are your thoughts on Chrome? What should the judge do?
I agree with you. I don't think spinning out Chrome is really option A for anyone. I think that would be maybe a stick that the court would use if Google was not participating in complying with a remedy that forced it to participate in the results and ads market as a participant instead of as a controller. In that case, then I think spinning out Chrome is probably the only thing that would get their attention. But I don't think the first thing anybody wants to do. To your point, who would buy it? How would it really work with search and monetization? So I think again, the spin out is kind of a sexy, fun thing to think about breaking up Google. If you go back to the Microsoft case, that was really a breakup was what the judge went with originally. And then I think he's just kind of really pissed at Bill Gates. There's a whole backstory there about how Bill Gates behaved during the depositions that he thought was never going to be public, and sort of pissed off the court. But the Court of Appeals said, no, we're not going to do that, gave it to another judge, and the judge came up with an injunctive relief that ended up working eventually. So that, to me, is probably the model that this judge is going to want to go with and really open up competition rather than make structural changes that nobody can really understand or foresee the effects of that.
So what you're saying is something similar to what you suggested for Apple. So the judge would say that Chrome needs to open up some competitive marketplace whereby other search providers can bid on search queries.
Maybe, but my feeling, and this is just me personally, Google's built up some amazing assets, and you probably get to keep what you've built. So they've built up Chrome, they've built up a search engine. There's no reason to take away things that they've worked hard to build. My take is really when you extend that monopoly into the third parties and force the third parties to funnel those users to you instead of competing for those users with your results and ads against other rivals, which is going to take some time to build up. Don't get me wrong. Their market share is not going to change like 30% in 6 months, right? It's going to take a year to 5 years for folks to figure it out. But the court can work on that time frame. And as long as Google's, don't be evil, participant in these markets, then, I think, you're going to find that Apple will have the ability to roll out over a time frame a better search experience and also to get the value distribution of those or allocation of those ads a little bit more squared up.
Okay, so I'm going to skip Android for a second because that's really complicated.
Yeah.
Let's go to ads. So this is an interesting topic, in my opinion, because the judge very clearly said that there was a monopoly in Google search ads, in text ads in particular, not search ads, text ads. And it seems to me that if you solve the ads problem, it's actually more important than solving the search problem, because even if a search goes through Google, if there are opportunities to buy it by other systems, you've blunted the pricing problem. Because the judge very clearly found that Google had the ability to raise prices on text ads. Now, when I brought this up before, both in my newsletter and on Twitter, all kinds of people have come in my DMs telling me I'm an idiot.
I agree with everything you just said, by the way.
Oh, good. So, let me give you I've heard two counter arguments. Counter argument one is basically from the Chamber of Progress, which is a corporate lobbying firm that Google donates to. So there's a guy named Adam Kovacevic, who's very smart, but he's a lobbyist and he's very pro-Google. And he basically wrote a long article saying that the antitrust was basically about search, not about ads, and it would be overreach, and it only has to do with Apple, and anything else is kind of secondary. I'm really dumbing down his argument. He's a lawyer. He knows what he's talking about, and I don't. And then the second argument is an interesting one that maybe you have a lot of insight on, which is people are saying, well, it's impossible for Google to raise the price on text ads since it's a bidded environment, and advertisers just get their ROI. Adam, please inform us.
I think that the decision is actually one of the great pieces of literature, and if you want to really see how our industry works, it's worth reading. You can read the first 40 pages and the last 40 pages. It's
really a page turner. But really, you know what? The antitrust complaint is better. If you're the ad tech one is better. That's really well written.
Yeah, it's kind of cool that all these smart people are coming in and talking about our industry. So I'll go to your first point. The judge talked a lot about Neva, and Neva, ex-Google folks came out and built an amazing search engine that was getting some traction, but they just couldn't monetize it. And if you can't monetize it, you can't stay in business. So you're absolutely right. Monetization is super important for anybody who's trying to build a search engine to figure out. And they're two separate problems that, need to be addressed separately, and yet they come together like media does. Product and monetization need to come together at some point when you get in front of a user. So I read Adam's piece. I don't know that he ever actually said what remedy he thought would work. So as you point out, he has some potential conflicts of interest. So it's hard to really shoot at what he's saying because it doesn't end up with another solution. But to your point that you've got to have the ability for competition on both the search results side, which is a market that the judge found was a monopoly, and the search ad side, which is a market the judge found was a monopoly. And you've got to have competitors in both those markets, and the ability for these browsers and OEMs to, really curate these experiences for users instead of, pushing their users straight to the Google search result page and letting Google have total control and lack of transparency to advertisers and lack of innovation for users, all the things that come with complete control.
Can you answer specifically this question of how could Google raise the price of text ads if it's an auction? Shouldn't the price just be entirely determined by demand?
Yeah, so they do a lot of things that came out in the trial. There's all these cute code names they have, but it basically comes down to they have these pricing knobs, and they can mess with the auction to get to wherever they want to get to. And they literally have email debates about, okay, well, we can't raise it 10% all at once, but if we raise it over 6 months, then the advertisers think it's their fault and they're doing something, that they're messing up their SEM campaigns. And 86% of the time, they think it's their fault that prices went up. I mean, they literally have this stuff. So they have total pricing control. The auction is something that they also have a lot of control into how that works. It's not like the search when it first came out, when, there's all these really granular fine controls and excellent granular reporting, and it was a true second price auction. But we're just so far away from that it's it really showed up in the trial evidence.
So if you let Bing in real time bid on search results,
right,
I think that is a pretty good remedy because Bing could change its margin to win more and thereby collect share and thereby create competitive advantage. Agree or disagree?
My work here is done, Ari. I think if you're on board with this, yeah, that's what I mean. Not just Bing, obviously. There's other firms out there too that would love to be involved in that. But yeah, that's exactly right. If you let other parties come in and bid for this traffic, you're going to see higher payouts to the publisher and probably lower prices to the advertisers, believe it or not. And it's going to fund more innovation for the consumer. So yeah, it really becomes a win-win-win. There's just a lot of value extraction that's been going on over the last 10 years. And, you reverse that with competition. That's how
is there a world where independent companies like Ad Marketplace, your company, or Kenshu or Marin or whatever they're called nowadays could bid in real time on search instead of pushing their demand to Google to mediate?
Yes.
It sounds like you need a lot of servers.
And we do it every day on, search on the open web is what we monetize. And we do it, for publishers that really don't want to or can't send their traffic to Google for various reasons. So, this is what we do. We've had to do it at the margins, obviously because of the distribution deals that Google has in place. But we've been kind of hanging around this space for 20 years, figuring it out. And we're super excited to get in there and bring some value to the publishers and the advertisers.
Okay, let's do a quick prediction. Now, this is on a long time frame. So let's say next 3 years. Does Apple invest in search or not? Just yes, no answers. I'm calling you Eric first since you're always the crazy predictor. Eric, does Apple create a search engine or buy one in the next 3 years?
Yes. The most interesting one, exciting one from my perspective is they buy Perplexity. But for sure, Apple can throw capital at whatever it wants. So, I think another exciting idea is they invest in and build their own search engine.
It would be so
we could talk about the Perplexity angle.
Yeah, let's talk about the Perplexity in the news, but also it'd be so funny if the DOJ objected to Apple buying Perplexity while the other half of the DOJ was complaining that Google had a monopoly. Adam, same question. Will Apple have a search engine in the next 3 years?
Yeah, I think the judge talks about that Apple has been investing in a search engine. It's almost like the decision is begging Apple to actually release it. And the remedy I think he'll come up with is going to create the conditions for Apple to do that in a way that doesn't jeopardize its current revenue and its current consumer experience. So I'm a hard yes on that.
And you, sir?
I'm a mixed. I kind of think Apple will relegate search to a less important place in their operating system, and they'll invest in more Siri and more AI and try to kind of bypass search. So I don't know where that falls on yes, no answer. I'm going to go with yes.
What is Siri?
Siri is like a navigational tool, and then it sends the searches to somebody else. So I would think the percentage of searches that Siri answers is going to increase. So I'm going to call that a yes, according to the rules of this little poll. But I'm hedging a little bit.
Just imagine it. Apple comes back with incredible advertising, advertises Siri as the search engine of the future. It's backed by LLMs. It gives you the best and only answer that you need. Maybe Apple's developed it. Maybe they've acquired Perplexity for this, and they upend, a significant piece of the search market. Like, that is exciting.
Yeah, and they'll just call it Apple Answers. They won't use the word search in any possible way.
Yeah, exactly. Apple.
I agree. And I think what's cool about the decision is that like 3 or 4 weeks ago, we wouldn't even be like thinking about this kind of stuff. So that's what's exciting is the zeitgeist kind of changes. We can all kind of imagine a world where it's not just everything gets force funneled to Google.
All right, this is a great conversation. We're not going to talk about the ad tech trial in this pod. You will be hearing a lot about that from me over the next couple of months. So let's take a quick break, and we'll come back with the news of the week. This podcast is brought to you by LiveIntent. Whether or not Google ever decides to remove cookies, LiveIntent's Hero, that's helping identity reveal opportunity, offers a solution that transforms non-addressable audiences into addressable inventory using first-party data. Hero is scalable, interoperable, and integrated with major industry players, providing a robust framework for navigating this new era. See how Hero can help you quickly unlock your inventory at liveintent.com/hero. That's liveintent.com/HIRO.
All right, and we're back with the news of the week. This is the, unfortunately, last week of summer, so traditionally a slow news week, but ad tech kept it spicy. We'll get into a little bit of more of the Google antitrust from some of the findings of the header bidding piece of it. We'll talk about Perplexity. We'll talk about Criteo CEO transition and a few other things if we've got the time. But before we do it, last week, we collectively stumped all of us with the Nexen TTD deal for ACR data. Ari, sounds like you got to the bottom of this, as I always hoped you would.
I did
explain this one to us.
I did no work. The listeners and the readers did the work. They just told me what it was, which is that a couple of years ago, when Nexen was still called Tremor, they did a deal with Vida, VIDAA, to get exclusive access to their data. That company is an operating system for TVs that are largely used in Europe and Australia. So it's a unique exclusive data set. And I guess the deal means that Nexen feels they can make money by licensing it to the trade desk as opposed to just using it exclusively for themselves. So that's the deal. Thank you, readers.
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you, readers. Thank you, listeners. Okay, let's get into it. Let's talk about header bidding. So earlier this week, you had an epic post about header bidding. You posted it on LinkedIn, presumably everywhere, called The War on Header Bidding. AdExchanger had a follow-up piece posted yesterday being Wednesday, Alison Schiff. It's titled, "Thanks to the DOJ, we now know what Google really thought about header bidding." And it's pretty damning. Some of the quotes here that are pulled from internal Google documents, quote unquote, "Why first look is crucial," quote unquote, "extremely sensitive info." This is pretty juicy and confirms what I think a lot of people were suspecting all along, which was, Google, made some moves to take out header bidding. What more can we talk about here with this one, Ari?
Well, I'll back up what Allison reported on. If you read the docs, I've spent a lot of time now in thecourtlistener.com and reading all these docs, and it's pretty clear there was a widespread feeling and set of actions that Google took to stop header bidding or to move the demand from header bidding into open bidding, which was their server-to-server solution. There are lots of emails where people are panicking. There are emails where a client like, I just want to throw one out, like News Corp, will send an email to their sales rep saying, "Hey, we're going to put in header bidding and we want to be able to, monetize that or optimize that with AdX." And then there's an internal train of everyone freaking out inside Google and people saying, "Oh no, this is terrible. Header bidding removes our advantages. We can't allow this." And so it's pretty clear how they felt. There's not a lot of mystery about how Google felt. And the reason why, and this is in my piece, but if you're not a day-to-day practitioner, you may not realize, is that header bidding effectively got rid of the dynamic allocation advantage that Google enjoyed, which allowed them to have a unique ability to bid on valuable inventory and did not allow competitors. So this was, allowing the fox into the henhouse. That's the expression.
Adam, did you look at this one?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't follow it as closely, but it's just so interesting to sit here and listen to you guys talk about it because it is just another example of, header bidding. It sounds like it was allowing for multiple parties to come in and compete and to drive up yields and to drive transparency to advertisers. And, Google, again, not in their interest when you have the scale and you have the liquidity. What you want to do is you want to take total control. Again, everything kind of echoes from what we see in search as well. So not at all surprised. And the hits just keep on coming.
This is true. I would recommend everybody both read Ari's piece and Allison's piece. In Allison's piece, it's interesting. At some point, the documents show that Google forecasted a 21% revenue loss for display ads and a 9% revenue loss for DV360 with some of the things that they were trying to beat. So this was a big one.
One other little point. One of the allegations in open bidding is that they did not allow companies that had a buy-side arm to bid. Because basically, if you're bidding your buy-side, it would be a cannibalization of the money that would normally go to AdX. So they were only letting sell-side, meaning SSPs, to bid into open bidding. They weren't letting DSPs. And there's been this ongoing controversy about AppNexus. In my piece and in the DOJ, they say AppNexus was not allowed, and Brian O'Kelly was pretty public about it. I think he gave interviews saying AppNexus was not allowed, and that was one of the big problems with open bidding. But people have reached out to me and said that's not entirely true, that Google did want to engage with AppNexus, and AppNexus refused. They would have been subject to the sell-only requirement. So that's just a very, very minor factual dispute that I've heard both sides of.
Yeah, much of the piece in AdExchanger was focused on Rubicon. Actually, it wasn't even Magnite at the time, and the negative impact that it had on Rubicon, which was obviously very very sell side focused.
I guess we'll have to ask O'Kelly when he comes on the pod, right?
If he participates in this discussion, it would be an interesting one. Yeah. Moving on. All right, let's talk about Perplexity. I'm so excited about this company and what they're up to. It sounds like you were experimenting with it as well, Ari, and just like had just an awesome search result versus the Goog.
Yeah, I tweeted this morning about a kind of complicated search that I just could absolutely not get any answers on Google from. I tried for several minutes to try to get to the information I needed. Single search on Perplexity gave me an amazing summary of everything I needed to know.
It's a really good product, and it's growing in usage. And they have, publicly stated that their future in terms of the business side and monetization is advertising. Last week, Adweek got a hold of their ads pitch deck and posted some information about it. There's been some follow on, and the discussion had, as usual, like everybody yelling at each other on ad tech Twitter and LinkedIn. And the one thing that people are yelling at each other about, and we'll talk about it, is this CPM. Perplexity is targeting a $50 plus CPM. We'll talk about that in a second, just to set the stage here with some summary points. So first is that Perplexity plans to insert ads within user queries and answers potentially as soon as Q4, which is a month from now. So this thing is coming. That's number one. Number two is they are targeting $50 CPMs. And they're also, sounds like they're experimenting with different formats. You could sponsor a related question. You can sponsor video ads next to an answer, almost like the old Vibrant model. They've got this thing that they're experimenting with called branded exploratory text. So it's very much, I think, on the edges of being native. But they're also pitching like omnichannel stuff, so co-branded out-of-home ads. So all sorts of things. I think they're in experimentation mode. Two things, and we'll talk about this. So the first is, in context, Perplexity does 230 million monthly queries, according to the deck. Just for context, Google does 22 billion a day. So it's still very small relative to what search is today. And then the other thing is, they're already, I think, thinking correctly around brand safety. So they're offering keyword blocking. They're offering locked answers, because I think that's the thing on advertisers' minds. Both of you, presumably, you kind of looked at this. What was your reaction to how Perplexity is going to market with this ads offering? Let you go first, Adam.
Sure. Yeah. So, search advertising is really hard. You point out that they're innovating on the search result experience. Ari, tweeted out this morning. You're going to see more of that. That's clearly where things are going. Is you're going to have some mix of kind of the old school indexes with Gen AI. That's the ideal search experience. On the results side, Google, I think in the trial it came out, they spent about $9 billion a year on R&D on search ads. That's clearly where not search results. That's clearly where Perplexity has been spending its money. They spend $11 billion, Google does, on search ads, and so they actually have to. It's just as hard, if not harder, to get search ads right, because they got to be relevant. I mean, they have to be super relevant, or it's CPC. So if people don't click, then there's no yield and there's no performance. You look what Perplexity is doing. I don't want to talk about them specifically, but search ads is hard. Search results are hard. They've done a great job on the results side, and you offer a CPM product. It kind of looks to me like you're like, hey, we've got some traffic going. Let's get some monetization going. We'll kind of figure it out as we go along, but let's at least start to get some revenue coming in here. CPC is clearly the model that you want to get to in order to, capture the most value from your search product. So I think that's where they'll end up, or that's where the winner in this space will end up. But it's great to see them, at least getting pitch decks out there, getting, the industry understanding there are going to be other ways to access user intent over the, over the long term.
So do you think the high CPM pricing is like a skimming strategy until they have sufficient amount of query depth?
Yeah. It's query depth, and also, just search ad tech. I mean, matching and pricing and reporting and measuring the value of search ads is no small feat, but we're on for about 20 years. And it takes, there's some learnings there. So, throw out a high CPM, see if everybody bites, make it brand safe. It's a pretty, first inning move, but like that's where you got to start, right?
Yeah, Adam, you might recall this. So I entered the fray, unfortunately, with making a comment on this, which was when Google first started. We were an agency, and we had the Orbits business, and basically there was an offer to like buy the travel keyword, buy airlines keyword, and they wanted this one. I don't remember specifically. I think they wanted like $80, $90 CPM. And we did it because it was like, a first to market opportunity, and it crushed. But very quickly, they moved on to a model that was, different and evolved. So that's the pattern that I saw here. I'll stop. All right, what's your take on this
that's the whole echoing thing that we were talking about earlier. We've all combined 60 to 70 years of experience in this industry. AOL used to sell keywords too, remember? I was like, come buy your keyword. And Overture came along and they said, you know what? CPC is the model for this. And Sergey and Larry and Tim and that team said, "Yep, absolutely right. Let's go CPC." But you mature into CPC. It's really hard to come out of the gate with a CPC product anywhere. It's a very tough thing to do. Google spends more on getting their CPC business right than they do on even innovating on the search results themselves. So it's you graduate into that, but you don't start there. And you got to start somewhere though, right? So you start with CPM.
Yeah, I don't want to argue against Google's ability to optimize ads because they're the greatest optimizer in the history of the world. But something in my gut tells me that if you put a video ad that was top of funnel next to a travel query, you just make a lot of money and it would be very valuable. So I'm on the one hand, my logical brain says Google knows what they're doing. 5-6 text links with click-based pricing is the right way to go. But my other side of my brain says, what a missed opportunity to do top of funnel with branded units and to charge a lot for them. So I'll also say that when I was still at Google, the biggest moneymaker was the CPM-based priced YouTube homepage, and the Google people hated it. They thought literally called it dirty money, and we were selling it for $1 million a day as a takeover. And it was beautiful. It was a great ad unit. It sold video games. It sold movies. And, there's really a place for top of funnel, good looking ads.
I don't think it's either or. I think you could do both. And it's a pretty good place to start because it's, like you said, it's lucrative and it's easy. And
Google's rejected it. So, Google search does not have any CPM based ads. So they have chosen not to have that.
Well, it's possible if we have new entrants in the market, Ari, we might have more innovation on the ad side.
That'd be exciting.
All right, this is one to watch. Don't yell at us anymore about this one. This was highly controversial. Anyway, moving on. Criteo CEO Megan Clarken is stepping away in the next 12 months to retire. Megan has done a really good job over the course of the past 5 years that she's been there. For context, according to Perplexity, the S&P is up 85% over the last 5 years. Criteo stock is up 145% over the past 5 years. So, with the ultimate scorecard being stock price, she's done quite well. Corey Davis, shout out to Corey from TransUnion. He got folks talking about via an active thread of who might be her successor. And again, people started yelling at each other. And I think Chris Vanderhook actually had, I think like the most interesting post here, which is, basically pay attention to who gets the job, because that basically is the future of Criteo. If it's, a serial CEO consultant type, the board is, kind of choosing, obviously one direction. If it's somebody from inside that, he named Brian Gleason as a potential candidate, that could be interesting. The one thing that Chris said, which I thought was quite interesting and where I think the most, probably the most interesting move would buy a company and, install a CEO who might, be the future of, retail media. What do you guys think? What happens after Megan steps down? What do you think the transition CEO is?
I'll kind of take this, but I don't want to say anything that's not appropriate. So I know Megan very well.
Sure.
I worked with her at Nielsen. I actually met with her the weekend before she started the job. So she had announced but hadn't taken it yet. And we had coffee and I kind of gave her my point of view on the company. And the thing is about this company is that it is probably a difficult job to manage it. It has 3 distinct cultures. It has sort of a US-based kind of aggressive culture. It has a French-based culture that's not so much oriented towards the business side, I would say. And then they acquired IP on Web, which is now Ukraine, used to be Russia based. And I think it's a pretty hard job bringing it all together, even though the results have been good. I think that 2 points are noteworthy. Number one is that it's been widely rumored that they were about to do a big acquisition of Sky, and yet that has not closed. Number two is she announced herself leaving. She was not fired. Like, there was no official announcement from Criteo saying we're, et cetera, et cetera. I think you could draw a line between those 2 points.
That's way more insightful than anything I would have to say. So yeah, that's interesting. And they're an important participant in this space, and you want to see them succeed and to continue to add value. And they've had their challenges. Obviously, the whole uncertainty about cookies is impacted them a lot. But you look at the results she's put up over 5 years and very difficult circumstances, and she deserves to leave on her own terms in her own way. And like you said, Eric, the success will tell us a lot about what the future holds.
Yeah, that makes sense. Good points on both. One other thing, sort of interesting as you travel around the internet this week. We'll put a link on this in the newsletter, I'm sure. Tim Vanderhook from Viant, which a while back, long time ago, acquired MySpace. Tim had this, I think, like epic post on LinkedIn about, from his perspective, the untold story of MySpace, which is basically everybody's been told that Facebook killed MySpace. In actuality, he makes the case that Google killed MySpace with, being able to leverage their position with YouTube Music, with licensing, and manipulate search results and have their entry into social. I thought it was super interesting, and it lit up comments. Ari, you actually made an interesting comment. I'd love to hear you expand on it, which was Google actually had like a horrible deal in MySpace's favor that, might have kept MySpace going for longer than it otherwise would have.
Yeah, in 2006, Google signed an exclusive deal to monetize MySpace for $900 million over, I think, 3 years. I don't remember the exact term of the deal. And that was the vast majority of its revenue. And Google took a bath on that because, and I was at Google at the time, so I do have some first party knowledge here, which is that inside Google, there were whole committees set up to how do we solve the MySpace targeting problem. And I learned the funniest phrase at the time, which was, they called MySpace the contextual desert. There's context. The pages on MySpace are about nothing. You can't target them. Oh boy, another person in their teens or 20s who likes music. There is nothing to go by. So Google called it the contextual desert. They said their AdSense algorithm just didn't work. There was nothing you could do. And at the time, that Google wasn't really doing, retargeting and things like that. So just bulk volume didn't work. So anyway, while Tim's points may be correct about some of the factors that resulted in consumers moving away from MySpace, I would argue that monetarily, Google probably gave it a couple of years of life it wouldn't have had otherwise.
But to your point, Ari, especially the earlier one, maybe that was just the wrong strategy. It was trying to find context when, we saw how social media works. It's actually a lot more with the kind of CPM deals that end up being more demographically targeted. They do very, very well. And, you sign a deal with the wrong partner. Yeah, you get the short-term money, but they give up on you and you have no idea how to actually monetize your business. And then, Zuck and Cheryl and go figure it out. And then it's game on over there. And it's just a completely different strategy than the one that Google was with.
I don't think it helped that they were bought by News Corp, who was not interested in pouring the billions of dollars that were necessary into it to build a real company. I mean, if a comp is something like Snapchat, Snap is taking a decade to figure out its monetization and tons of money going into that. And MySpace, you have to believe that MySpace not only would have been able to build monetization off of nothing, but also make the transition to mobile, which, I think we all think it was the greatest accomplishment Facebook and Zuck ever did. You'd have to believe a lot of things to think that MySpace would still be around and be a major public company.
I think that makes sense. And to be clear, we're talking about like long time friends. I forget when Viant acquired it, but they acquired it from News Corp much longer, much later than what this period that we're talking about. Do you remember what it was?
Didn't they acquire from Time? Didn't it go from News Corp to like Time and Meredith or something?
It bounced.
Okay. All right. I'm sure somebody will correct us.
I want to say it was like 6 or 7 years ago the Viant transaction happened.
I think it's longer than that, but it's not. It wasn't back in the aughts. I think it might be 10 or 12 years ago, but I'm pretty sure News gave up. News sold it to, I want to say Time Inc., and then Time got bought by Meredith, and then Viant took the digital assets from Time Meredith and included MySpace.
Viant was acquired by Time.
Oh no, yeah, that's right. Viant was acquired by Time, and they got it when they exited. And somehow Justin Timberlake was involved, or is it Justin Bieber?
Yeah,
it was Timberlake.
It was JT.
Yeah, JT. You and JT are pals, hanging out on the Jersey Shore.
I thought they call him JT. Anyway,
I'm sure the Vanderhooks call him JT because he's on their cap table.
I am here for the Vanderhooks arc. I love that they are entering the discourse and mixing it up. I've been waiting for this because they're awesome. Anyway, one last one, and again, we got more on the Google front. So Yelp sues Google for antitrust in local search. Didn't they do this years ago?
They were part of the search antitrust trial. It was one of the sets of allegations was that Google had abused Yelp and taken their content, and it got dismissed by the judge last year. So they got removed from the trial, and I think they even appealed it and lost again. So now this is the first time they're suing them directly. Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the course of events.
There's so many different threads to pull on here. I don't know. I think you've pretty much got it nailed. But I think you are going to see direct lawsuits against Google by people who've been harmed. Obviously you have the decision now creates liability. Now gets damages in antitrust are triple. So anything you can prove, you get 3 times that. So you'll definitely see some private litigation, and I think Yelp has been on the forefront with Google antitrust issues for many years, and it's not surprising to see them come out of the gates first. And these are just more sort of torpedoes in the water. And I think a bigger conversation I have at some point is, if you're running Google, how would you think about your future? And if you're Larry and Sergey, how do you think about your legacy? I mean, what's the first paragraph of your New York Times obit going to be? They're relatively young guys, and they can make some decisions about how they want to play out this third act. But we're in a moment in time now where Google is going to transform, and I don't think that I bet against them making some radical and interesting moves here. And I know we're also sort of still processing the fact that they're losing trial after trial and what the remedies are going to be, and but this idea that they're sort of untouchable and they're always going to sort of get out of these regulatory issues. I think that's kind of in the rearview mirror, and I'm much more interested to see and think about, especially folks who have worked there and have been there. What do you think their future looks like? And if you were running Google, we got great. I'll take the CEO job at Google. Might be open. What would you do, and how would you think about your future?
Yeah, I think it's a really tough problem. And the question is, do the founders want to be as involved as they need to be? Returning founder Steve Jobs style, I don't think they want to do that. But I don't know what they do want to do. So if you could get into their minds, you would know more than I would.
I think this is a great place to call it. That was a mic drop by you, Adam.
I think the Yelp antitrust suit gets 0 stars, takes too long to get service.
That's the mic drop.
All right. I'm just holding that. I was just, I have it in my back pocket, just waiting. All right. Let's call it. Adam Epstein from Ad Marketplace. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom about search and antitrust. Really appreciate it.
Guys, it was a lot of fun. Thanks for everything you do, not only for the industry, but, keeping the conversation going alive. That's where all the innovation, good ideas come from. So I'm just happy to be a part of it. And, look forward to watching you guys do your thing in the future.
Awesome. Eric, always a pleasure.
Thanks, guys. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for subscribing to Marketecture. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.
Thank you for listening to the Marketecture podcast. New episodes come out every Friday, and an insightful vendor interview is published each Monday. You can subscribe to our library of hundreds of executive interviews at marketecture.tv. You can also sign up for free for our weekly newsletter with my original strategic insights on the week's news at news.marketecture.tv. And if you're feeling social, we operate a vibrant Slack community that you can apply to join at adtechgod.com.